we're going to start back from the beginning here. So again, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Christopher Francisco. I am the founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Native Consulting. And I've had the fortune to be able to be in a number of places, from leading cloud architecture at Chevron to being able to be on the forefront of digital and facilities transformation at Chevron Corporation as part of their facilities engineering information management. And I've also had the chance to work with the Google team going across companies like Airbnb and Cruise Automation to deliver new technologies, especially as it goes to the advancement of IoT information and systems across multiple different cloud environments. And so today I just want to bring you guys through a few areas of innovation. You're going to see me rapidly go through a number of slides, but what we're going to focus on is the adoption of this new technology called IoT, or I should say the advancement of it and the advanced adoption of it. The technical capabilities, what are the things that it's bringing to the industry the most? And the last area will be mostly around how do we ensure that our organizations receive value from the adoption of IoT. So pardon the long pause there and pardon the mute, but we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So one of the things that's changing the most is that change is changing even more than anything else. Our organizations have come from a place where we're used to very long adoption cycles, and we can see here where that comes from. In the past, we've had anywhere from hundreds of years to adopt anything from the telescope to steam engines. And obviously, as we move into everything from operating systems to hybrid cars, we're seeing that change even more frequently. So one of the big things that we'll talk about is how do we allow for this rapid change that IoT provides to impact just about every area of our ecosystem. Again, when we start to look at the adoption rates, we start to see that everything from how we might have previously adopted electricity and spent dozens of years to do that, now we actually have the ability to more rapidly adopt this technology. And because of that, it's not only changing how we do IoT, but it's changing how we adopt technology. We're really going from a number of eras in IoT. As we've made our way past the industrial and digital era, we're going into this autonomous era where everything is expected to be customized. And so what we can do with that is create not only what is a typical advanced process for our manufacturing, but even advanced manufacturing processes that can tailor day, time, and manipulate how you deliver IoT in that sector. So again, we're going to be looking at everything from the people, the process, how does our data flow, and the things that are connected to them, and really dive into the different areas. I'm just going to pause here. If you've been in the industry for a while, you've seen many different advancements, from the introduction of robotics to new technologies coming into the space. One of the benefits I've had to be able to explore different car manufacturing plants is to see things like the Fanuc robot. And when we start to see the implementation of how robotics is happening nowadays, we're starting to see a lot more granular control over how even, let's say, a car line like the Tesla Model X might be able to produce. It's becoming very customized. And so again, when we start to look at everything from how the logistic arms are able to go and modify to their actual implementation and move forward the customer process in a lot more tailored way, we're starting to see new forms of adoption for IoT. And so we, again, as we start to see the success elements, being able to have that advanced customization, designing for flexibility, and being able to repeat rapidly is important. So we're going through multiple cycles of innovation here. And we can see that, again, we're coming from our previous industry 2.0 and 3.0, moving away from the mass assembly lines. And obviously, we've been doing great at the information and computing age. But as we move forward, Industry 4.0 is really where we're able to have everything connected. And we'll talk about these multiple connectivity models and business models that allow for innovation to take place. So one of the things that we have to recognize is that there's multiple levels of digital adaptation. And what's important is that when we start to look at how this technology is adopted and how it's used, it becomes very important. For example, just having a simple web presence, when you start to come to technology, maybe just the ability to get information in and get information out. But as an organization matures, it may be able to start to leverage that internal information to do new things. Now that it's been able to do new things inside the organization, we can start to have collaboration with the customer, so we can break outside of doors. And when we start to really get deep into the Internet of Things, we start to see our entire organization, business, product, and customer processes change. So again, this really lays the foundation for how we see innovation in IoT. And I think what really becomes important is how we see the reality of that come into our ecosystem. So IoT is happening now, and we start to see a number of different use cases, from open pit mining to how Pepsi company has been able to just about remove their IT staff at the edge. You know, again, as you get deeper into IoT, not only does it allow for you to automate and have information on everything that's produced, it also allows for you to look for innovations that can happen in the product life cycle. For example, let's say that I'm producing a car and I have 10 different sensors that are being produced as a part of that car. While I can always use the best engineering algorithms and big data to ensure that I am producing a great part, what becomes interesting is when I take that car on the road for hours, days at a time, I can actually start to use IoT to send data back in the real world. And so again, just another example of how we can leverage IoT in new ways, being able to experience things not only in the plant, but also on the road or in the real world becomes important. So again, a number of different implementations. Goldcorp's gold mine, they actually were able to save on repair costs up to $2 million just by implementing the IoT capability. And by having that instrumentation, they were able to really have the connected mind tell them as things were occurring. Again, the number of things that we can do in cause and effect, when we have the Internet of Things, we're able to see information that is in one place, maybe with no human. Now the technology can report to us. And so in their case, they no longer have to have these self-inspections. Things automatically happen. Again, many use cases in transportation and logistics. We're seeing everything from the ability to have your entire fleet of tractors or entire fleet of automobiles. For a company like UPS or DHL, they're able to see what's happening across their entire line, not just from where cars are going, but if a car has now received a flat tire, maybe they have to redirect how things are being done on the route in real time. And so from transportation logistics, that real-time logistics systems, not only for the customer, but for the actual delivery, becomes important. And oil and gas, and one of the big fortunes I've had to be able to work with Chevron Corporation is how they're doing things across their company. And as you look at some of the things they put out on the digital oil field, it's been exciting to see how they're able to leverage new technologies. And so across the energy space, we see many different companies who've been able to look at safety and see how they can predictively go out and attract information, no matter whether it's coming from the human or whether it's coming from the actual drilling, for example, and receive that information in real time. Again, everything becomes a data point, and everyone becomes a data point when it comes to IoT. We're also seeing a lot in the areas of smart cities. And again, as you look at these different areas, we want you to start to think about, how can this apply into my environment? And so when we see the smart city, we can see anything from collecting information on air pollution, or the ability to see what's happening with garbage pickup. You know, maybe if you're in the US, you're saying, hey, that's no big deal. But internationally, it's huge on being able to have logistics for those operations. And so the smart city might influence how the city plans, everything from traffic to its ability to handle the city's internal processes. In IoT and shipping and logistics, we see there's so many different applications. And again, when you have the autonomous vehicle technology that may be used more in consumer, we started to see the self-driving car. And personally, I believe the self-driving car has been one of the greatest advancements of our time, not just because it's doing new things with technology, but because it shows the human depending more on systems for its own livelihood. And the fact that in our day-to-day, we might transport not only ourselves, but our family members, our children, and such with such dependence is an amazing feat in my eyes. And in industry, we're starting to see that this is also being applied to just about everywhere. We can see this applied again to the autonomous vehicles that might be delivering anything from how we do our next Uber implementations, and how you can see things like cruise automation, getting that data for self-driving cars, down to just about anything. When we come to farming, obviously our tractors need to be able to transmit information and give information on what it actually is producing. And so all of that becomes part of the life cycle. We've talked about in facilities how we can start to use HVAC, and the ability for everything from your sprinkler system to your heating and cooling are now part of the IoT life cycle. One of the things that we'll talk about in the 4 applications of IoT, which is connected devices, remote operations, being able to do predictive analytics, and being able to do predictive maintenance, we'll start to find that in these 4 different core value propositions, we can see different advancements. And depending on where the company is, we may be able to use IoT in new ways. So for example, in the smart building, it may be just enough innovation when we see data points coming from everywhere, from our elevator systems down to our what's happening in a specific location, a restroom, a facility, and having that all connected to be just enough value. We also start to see, again, companies like PepsiCo who put this inside of all of their drink machines at the edge by being able to have insights on whether a machine was up or down. Just having that binary 0 or 1, available, not available, was enough information for them to completely change their IT operations. And so being able to see that capability happen across the world as for their implementation is just amazing. Again, the net result, for example, with Pepsi, is that they reduced their IT operations by 80%. That's a huge cost savings for a company like Pepsi. So again, as we look through, we can start to see that IoT is becoming ubiquitous, not just in the US, but across the country. And this is extremely important for the value proposition of IoT in our world. So, you know, there's plenty of different use cases, and I want to take you guys through those because sometimes being able to understand how other people are using this technology is to be able to apply it to yourselves. In Canada, BC Hydro, which delivers electricity, was able to start to use smart meters in their IPv6 network. And if you're not familiar with IPv6, IPv6 is what is the new language of communication on the internet, or I should say connecting people to the internet. With the previous version, IPv4, we couldn't represent every human and device as a unique data point inside of our environment. That meant that IoT was slower. That even meant that IT was slower. But with IPv6, because everyone and everything is unique, you see an affinity for every device or every person, there's up to 9 to 12 devices. And what that means is that if your refrigerator can't talk to your coffee maker, then you will not be happy with the value proposition of IoT. And so long story short is that with IPv6 and new technologies, we're able to represent that uniqueness across the world and bring value to everyone across the ecosystem. For BC Hydro, they were able to do this with their advanced metering. And that meant over 1.9 million smart meters. That's a lot of devices, and it's a lot of people that it's managing for. They were able to get that uniqueness and get that information from their end users. And so by doing so, they were able to track real time what's happened with outage notifications, being able to look at monitoring and grid automation. They improved power management and predictive maintenance. This is a big deal in the sense that in one case, they improved just how they do business. They were able to receive the information and have a better mechanism for monitoring costs. Just a little bit more context on BC Hydro in Canada was that they were actually having a lot of people who were, let's just say, borrowing electricity from them. And so whether this would be a commercial, maybe a set of buildings, or a personal, this became a huge cost risk for the company, and this was a loss of profitability. And so again, by introducing IoT, they were not only able to track the location, but they were also able to have that information in real time. The second big thing here is predictive maintenance. Not only were they able to reduce their own loss, but they were able to add more value to the customer. And this is what we really want to look for in our IoT projects. Oftentimes we're looking at ways to save money, but the biggest projects that are impactful are the ones that change business outcomes. And in their case, they're now able to respond to issues that are happening in the field quicker, and that's a huge savings, a huge impact rather, for their customer audience. Anglo American Platinum was actually doing this in their fields as well. They were able to really look at how they made decisions on the fly. And so when they looked at their process control systems, oftentimes we talk about IT, OT. Obviously our IT systems are the ones that move our computers, but when we look at the industrial systems, having those to be connected alongside our IT systems makes it available for us to do computing at the edge where our OT systems live, but also aggregate that information at the core. So now that we have, let's say that we have multiple sites, if we can aggregate all of those OT systems and start to look at decisions that happen over time, we actually get better data and better impact. And so by producing IoT for their IT and OT networks, they were able to secure and create enterprise-wide visibility across their ecosystem. Again, when you look at producers like Bentler Automobile, their ability to leverage IoT for how they produce automotive components and be able to produce everything from metal to down to the actual car components, it's been extremely helpful for them. So just by being able to use IoT, they were able to get faster and more efficient operations. And the last company I want to talk about is huge. They also participate in the producing of IoT, but their robots are kind of the conduit. And so many different car manufacturers are using Fanuc, and it's just amazing to see what robots can do for the automotive process. And so down to being able to see, oftentimes when you look at automobiles, you have the big hunk of metal that needs to be bolted into different components. And so by looking at everything from how the different tools are able to bolt in a specific component, which are called shots, in the calibration and vision systems that take place, you're starting to get an entire picture of not only the automobile as it's produced, but the components that are produced as a part of it. So by having that built-in application and integration with hardware and software components, it changes the way things are happening with plants. And so it's so very important that we start to look across these different use cases, because we start to get to a very differential business impact. At any point in time, you guys can raise your hand and ask any questions, but I'm going to continue in. I want to take you guys through the business value propositions that are important for IoT. So we've talked about a number of things. We've talked about how IoT applications are being applied to different places, different types of businesses, as well as the different industries. We've talked about some of the different approaches with IoT, whether it becomes connected devices, remote operations, predictive maintenance, or predictive analytics. And when we start to look at the actual application, we start to see the importance of getting payback and business value. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into those different applications. But I want to take us through, what is it like to get the payback and business value? And so whenever you look at an IoT project, it is actually expected to deliver payback within 3 years. This isn't a big deal, but the sheer amount of impact that an IoT project does for an organization typically means that the amount of effort needed is significantly more, but the results are life-changing. You know, 75% of data that we have today is moving to the edge. And what that means is that it's moving into everything down to the manufacturing plant. It's moving closer to us. We are the edge. We, as human beings, whether we're in a smart oil field or whether we're in a large city, we have to have the ability to deliver value. And so what's happening is that as a part of that, the rate of change, again, for IoT systems and IoT implementations is more dramatic than ever before. And so again, because of that, the return on investment for these projects have to be significantly large, and the cycles are a lot quicker. We can see here that over 30%, or just about 30% of projects take more than 3 years, but you can see even projects that are supposed to be there within 2 years is at 46%. That's a huge change from previous projects. You know, again, going back to the PepsiCo use case, how you start to see the different applications becomes significantly important. So taking the challenge of those insufficient plant works and the insufficient use of funds into a unified IoT platform where they have standard network and unified support is, again, how they were able to create an IoT project that was useful for their operations. Oftentimes, when we start to look at organizations, we start to look at the maturity models of the organization. We need to understand where the organization is before we dive into a project. Going back to those 4 areas of remote operations, remote connectivity, predictive maintenance, and predictive analytics, those are actually different levels of maturity for where an organization is. Let me explain. The first area is that our organization may use little to no technology at all. In early stage agriculture, we see this often, where there's actually no technology being used. Oftentimes in many different international manufacturing plants, technology may not be being used in the process to produce a specific product at all. So things like just having the ability to see into the production of a product, or being able to see in the production of the manufacturing line, is the first step. For others, we may be further than that, and depending on the distribution of the people, data, process, and things, a mnemonic we previously covered, we might see that we're so global that just having the ability to see things remotely is important. If we're NASA and we need to be the ability to have more instrumentation around all of our remote components, this may be obviously something that they thought about ahead of time. But the point is that you can see the distribution very clearly. We need the ability to see everything that's happening at all times. And so again, that's kind of the second level where, yes, technology is obviously being used, but you might be able to deliver more instrumentation, more insights. Maybe you're putting more things on the astronaut in that example. And so again, as I continue to take you through these use cases, I want us to understand that in some places, it's just the ability to have the connection. And in other cases, it's the ability to go out and do more information and knowledge required things. We all know about the information lifecycle of data, information, and knowledge. And as we move past just having raw data, as we move past just having remote connectivity or remote operation insights, which is information, we start to look at the knowledge that we have. And so in the knowledge spectrum, we're not just trying to get individual data points and have that come to a central ecosystem. We're actually trying to predict the future. And this can be anything. We may want to be able to predict the rate of which we're going to produce in the Southeast Asia region, where the temperature might change and it may change our rate of production. We might simply want to say, you know what, we've always tried to predict this based on looking at our numbers, but maybe we can predict this based on the actual predictive information coming out of our manufacturing plants. How often is our bed going down, our sensing bed going down? How often is there new failures in the environment? And be able to use that information, or the Internet of Things, to retrieve that information. So a little bit of a caveat there, but again, wanting for you to get in your purview the level of which your organization is and how it might start to look at its IoT projects. Again, for PepsiCo, having a unified IoT platform, having a standard network and unified support, shows that in this specific case, they were at the very beginning of their IoT lifecycle. And so what goes into that business value proposition is really having the evaluation of payback from an IoT deployment. Reduction in costs is a good example. Revenue generation is what we see in a majority of IoT projects. Streamlined business processes, being able to go and repeatedly form new business, is a very important thing for mature organizations. Increasing uptime. Again, if we have 50% of, in this crude example, drink machines that are down in a specific region, we might send a number of people there to increase the uptime. Designing and creation of new business models. Again, when we start to look at the value generation, if we can start to provide something as a service, and if you're in the technology field, you saw that HP, for example, had a recent push from their executive leadership that said, hey, we're going to produce anything as a service. Everything that we have, whether it's our hardware, whether it's our software, we're going to create service business models. And that's something that we're seeing across the industry. People want to consume more with variable or OpEx as opposed to capital expenditure. They want the flexibility of being able to use something today and not have to use it tomorrow. And so as you look at your own application, being able to do that in your business process is important. Again, the implementation of new go-to-market strategies, new products and services are all valuable things to consider. And so as we look at the different areas that the organization have the greatest impact, we can see that when we start to unlock new revenue opportunities, when we start to create innovation capabilities, we see a higher return on investment. And so when we look at the business index for IoT, we can see that revenue generation is first, and being able to recover our costs, so on and so forth, happens thereafter. Again, going back to some of our use cases, we can see here for different types of brewers, food processors, miners, just across different parts of the industry, we have different applications. And so being able to increase the capacity and cut brew cycles for a brewer. Again, look at the amount of change that's happening. 50% cut to brew cycles because they're getting the information they need. This is transformative for any company, really in any industry. Food processors, just by having a 3% in a streamlined industry that's been there since the beginning of time, 3% increase in productivity is huge. And being able to cut down on some of the costs may mean that you can deliver products at a cheaper price and compete in a very competitive market. You know, I'm going to jump to the right for our automakers and start to see that the managed variation in real-time production, you know, we've talked a lot about everything from Tesla to Mercedes-Benz, many of these different companies that are out there producing vehicles. You can start to see where just being able to predict reliably that a car will be produced on time with the level of quality that it needs is important. And so to have that level of cost savings is huge. Oil and gas, again, these are high commodities that have been here for hundreds of years. And the ability to improve the bottom line for a Fortune 5 or Fortune 20 company by 10 to 11% is game changing for that company. And so all of everything from exploration and production to the ability to see into your facilities means that you can improve that bottom line. So again, we start to see that value proposition. I want to continue to hone in on the fact that when you start to see that increase in product or service quality, those are the things you want to aim for, but they may not be the thing that you can tackle first. And so many companies will look at, we talked about BC Hydro, who was able to reduce theft, but we also saw that they were able to respond to business faster. And so sometimes what you want to do is start in cost savings so that you can start to get operational wins and move into new capabilities, new revenue for your product lines. So again, where we find payback, information collection, if we're at the beginning or our organization is in a market that doesn't heavily use technology, we're going to just benefit from being able to see into the world. Then we want to move into the remote operations or those predictive analytics. And when we start to predictively make decisions, now we can take that and proactively implement that into our product and life cycles. And so that's where our predictive maintenance comes in, or other predictive operations. And so when we start to look at those components of IoT Payback, the improved safety and security, efficient processes, the business opportunities are important. And we again see the cost savings, the asset utilization, and the productivity all contributing to value. So I want to move us into a little bit more about the different types of technology used. And I think that when we start to take a more federated look at how IoT is being used in the real world, we start to see how we can apply that in our own situations. So one of the applications of that is to really start to look at our environment. In our environment, our empowerment, our execution and expertise, in order to understand how we're applying this technology, we have to understand ourselves and our organizations best. So again, we talk about company, people, and tech. And so we're having more workers and different workers apply technology into the ecosystem. And as we can see with companies like KPMG who've been able to leverage the technology, they've been able to really focus that the priority starts at the top. And so again, when we start to look at the different applications, we have to look at the people who are actually going out to implement it. And so if you'll give me a second here, I want to bring up a little bit more under the hood so you guys can look into that. So one of the models that I go through is IoT and security. And we'll also talk, we'll dive deeper into the technology as we dive into the IoT under the hood. And I'll take you guys a bit through OSI and a couple of other interconnects that happen in the industry. With security and the cybersecurity, you start to see different models. And why this is important is because as we look at not only the application of IoT, we look at how one reviews the actual protection of their IoT implementation and actually lands into how the organization goes out and achieves things. And so we start to look at the different targets, everything from our cars and video cameras to our power grids and buildings. One of the approaches that we look at is how organizations are securing their IoT implementations, and everything from perimeter defense, being able to be safe at the edge or around the ecosystem, into having things that are built inside of our devices and systems to make them secure, right down to being commensurate with our organizations and risk-based self-defense. Again, as we get under the hood, I wanted to really focus you on how IoT is going out and how it's leveraging this bridge between IT, OT, and security. And when we start to look at things like the OSI model, please do not throw sausage pizza away, physical data lake network, transport session, presentation, application, we start to see how organizations leverage IoT and secure that across its perimeter. And so when you start to look at everything from your network communication to how information is shared up to how data is getting into software, you really have a good model for how you get to maturity and security in an IoT environment. We also start to look at our risk management and risk models in IoT. And so obviously we want to start to look at what are the most probable impacts as well as the most probable outcomes that might come in these models. And so again, we're going to continue to dive into the forays of not only how we implement IoT, but how we recognize the value. And so as we go back to our different implementations, we want to look at the components of IoT Payback. You know, this was a really good use case from Samsung SDS, and it started to show us into the smart home. And I promise you guys I'll get back to a little bit more of the technical underpinnings as I come across our slides for that. But I want to take you guys back to the business use cases. So we can see here in the smart home that we actually have been able to look at things from how we protect and lock our doors, to how we achieve lighting, to controlling our AC in the wireless network. And what's important is to start to realize that anything, whether it's something that we use, whether it's something that protects us, whether it's something that provides us connectivity, or whether it's something that we use day in and day out like lighting, everything becomes a participant in the IoT environment. And so all of this becomes very important to how we start to look at those components of IoT Payback. You know, again, if you don't remember anything from this webinar, what I would like for you to take home is the ability to understand that change is happening rapidly, to understand that how you look at the actual technology and implementation, whether that's connected devices, remote operations, the ability to look at how you do predictive analytics to make better decisions, or predictive maintenance to be able to proactively go out and perform operational needs. These are the conduits for which the largest IoT projects take place. And then the last place is really understanding the business applications. And as we go in through these final minutes, we really want to take that home. And so we've seen things like the smart home, but what's really happening now is smart retail. And in fact, retail is making up one of the top 2 quadrants for actual return on investment for IoT projects. And so in this particular example, we can see that not only do we have our family who might be based on their age, how often they shop, and their gender, we might be able to see how to sell a specific product to ensure that that family is successful. We can see here that we have an umbrella where it may be raining outside today, so we can really focus that in our convenience store, right? And again, even having that interaction with the different products that may be throughout our shopping area, maybe we're a large shopping retail or what have you, all becomes ways to leverage the retail approach. And again, just so impactful, everything from automotive to how we make business decisions even. Blockchain is becoming this, which is a network model, is becoming even another way that we're leveraging the information sharing aspects of the connected device to change complete business models. And so again, this is a clear area as well where you can receive value. And so I am going to bring us into a close here for questions. And we've been able to cover a number of things throughout this discussion and webinar. We've been able to see not only the ability to have our different payback models, but also some actual implementations of IoT in the real world, as well as how we are able to focus on very specific models for payback. And that being everything from, again, I'll say it again, if you take nothing else back on the technology side, being able to see our connected devices and remote operations down to predictive maintenance and predictive analytics become a very big take home for your value propositions. And so how you can put a lens on to focus you on your IoT projects. And again, when we start to look at our payback models, yes, we want to target our larger business impacts of being able to produce new services and offerings. And sometimes we start at the beginning with savings on our costs and savings on our operations so that we can get to those larger 1 to 3 year business impacts. And so with that, I will say thank you for your time, and I am available for any questions that you might have. So we have a question from one of our panelists, or one of our participants, excuse me. Can you give more details regarding IoT employees that are being sought? I'm gonna switch to a slide here on our different IoT employees, because IoT brings about a very new approach in how we look at workers. And so let me go ahead and share this. When it comes to IoT and workers, there's actually just totally new jobs that are transformed from old jobs. We used to talk about just the IT guy or the OT operator, but now we're looking at robotic specialists and data scientists and cloud architects and the industrial network engineer and the machine learning scientists. I don't think there's a person who's ever come up at the age of 15 years old and said, I want to be a machine learning scientist. But in this new paradigm, the job market is extremely different. So for anyone out there looking to hire, I would say that what you want to start to do is look at people who have backgrounds in taking information to knowledge in the technology space, or people who are able to capitalize on new types of business models. And so you can even start to see customer makers. I think that's a very formulated name, but again, it's a new type of sales process that goes into the internal and external application of the technology. Are there any other questions? All righty. Well, we'll go ahead and conclude our webinar, and we want to say thank you for your time. And we are looking forward to being able to bring you more insights, whether that be IoT or your next generation impact. We will be here to create new impacts for you. Thank you for your time.